You never expect the man who kissed your forehead in the hospital to become the man who uses a courtroom to take your child. But that's exactly how my love story died. I'm Emily. I was 24 when I met Daniel at a charity mixer my best friend dragged me to after work. He had that confident laugh people want to stand next to. I was new at my design job, still paying off student loans, still learning how to be an adult. He bought me a ginger ale, asked about my sketches, and said, "You're the first person in this room who actually listens." It sounded honest. It felt safe. I let myself fall. We married a year later. The wedding was small but perfect to me, white lights, my sister Mia crying happy tears, Daniel promising forever. He already owned a growing construction business and liked to take charge, restaurant orders, vacation plans, even my shoes. "I just want the best for you," he'd say, and I told myself that was love. When I got pregnant, his control hardened into rules. He scheduled my doctor visits. He told me which prenatal yoga class was reputable. He tracked our budget and said my job could wait until after the baby. I nodded because I was tired and scared and thought teamwork sometimes looks like surrender. Our son, Liam, arrived on a rainy Thursday at 3:12 a.m., red-faced and furious at the cold. Daniel cried. So did I. In that first hour, I believed we were a family that could handle anything. The first year taught me otherwise. Sleep was a rumor. The house filled with bottles, burp cloths, and my nervous lists taped to the fridge. Liam cried at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 5:30 a.m. I cried at noon in the shower so no one would hear. Daniel called it chaos management. He liked schedules, charts, and quiet. Babies don't. He said I was coddling our son. "He has to learn early," he'd tell me, lifting Liam from my arms when I tried to soothe him. "We're raising a man." Liam was 6 months old. Arguments became our soundtrack. I wanted gentleness, Daniel wanted discipline. I wanted a partner, he wanted command. If dinner was late, he'd tap his watch. If the house was messy, he'd list the ways I could use my free time more efficiently. When I pushed back, he'd remind me who paid the mortgage. "You'd have nothing without me." I started to believe it. I stopped seeing friends. I smiled in photos and learned to keep my voice soft. When I asked about the late nights and the new assistant wearing very bright lipstick, he smiled like I was silly. "Don't be dramatic," he said, and kissed my hair like I was a child. Liam turned 1 on a windy Saturday. We had cupcakes and a lopsided balloon arch I made from YouTube. In every picture, I look like I'm holding my breath. After everyone left, Daniel stood in the kitchen and said he wanted structure for year 2. He had a list: nap training, speech classes, no rocking to sleep. I said no. He said, "You don't get a say." Something in me cracked. "He's not a project," I whispered. "He's a baby. He needs us to be kind." "Kindness makes weak boys," Daniel said, and laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, after another late night and another cold dinner, he said the sentence that changed everything: "If you ever try to leave, you'll never see him again." I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I memorized the pattern on the ceiling while Liam snored in his crib. I told myself he didn't mean it. But Daniel had friends in high places, judges at charity events, lawyers at golf tournaments, donors who owed him favors. He loved to brag about his network. I'd rolled my eyes before. Now I was scared of it. He filed first. Divorce. Full custody. His petition called me unstable and overwhelmed. He used my therapy appointment as proof of fragility. He said my job history showed a lack of focus. He even included screenshots of my late-night texts to Mia, "I feel like I'm drowning," as evidence I couldn't handle motherhood. His lawyer smiled at me like I was already a ghost. We sat in a cold, bright courtroom while strangers weighed my worth. My attorney, a kind man who tried his best, looked small next to the machine Daniel had built. A character witness from his company swore he'd seen me hysterical twice. I had been crying in a parking lot. Twice. A doctor I'd met exactly once wrote postpartum concerns in a report, and that word followed me like smoke. The judge used phrases that still make my stomach drop: best interest, consistent environment, financial stability. Daniel's side had charts. Mine had truth and shaking hands. I lost. The ruling gave Daniel full custody and, through a series of legal maneuvers I still don't fully understand, the right to adopt Liam alone. My appeals were denied. Visitation was not recommended at this time. That final line knocked the air from my lungs. Liam left in a navy coat with little wooden buttons. He looked back once from the porch, confused by all the adult voices. I kissed his forehead and told him I loved him more than pancakes and stars combined. Then the door closed. Grief turned the world to blur. Days stacked up like wet paper. I moved through rooms like I was trespassing in my own life. People said, "You're strong," and I wanted to scream. Strength felt like stone tied to my ankles. But grief is a maker. It reshapes you. After weeks of quiet, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back, pale, hollow, smaller somehow. I said my name out loud. Emily. It sounded like a promise. That night, I opened my laptop and built a folder with one word: records. I listed everything I could remember from the past year: dates, names, times, comments. I scanned receipts. I requested copies of reports. I started a savings spreadsheet. I wrote Liam a letter I didn't mail. I didn't plan flames. I planned patience. I took a job at a small design studio. I reopened a dusty savings account in only my name. I went to therapy and kept the notes. I stopped checking Daniel's social media and started walking before sunrise. I learned to breathe again. Daniel's world stayed loud: galas, speeches, interviews where he praised family values. I watched the clips with the sound off. He looked polished. He looked untouchable. He also looked like a man who'd forgotten that storms don't announce themselves, they gather. I wasn't ready to fight. Not yet. But I was done being afraid. This is how my revenge began, not with fireworks, but with a binder, a budget, and a woman learning how to stand up again. The first year without Liam felt like living underwater. Every sound was muffled, every movement slow. I woke up in the middle of the night expecting to hear him crying, only to remember that he wasn't there. His crib sat empty in the corner of my apartment, a soft blue blanket still folded the way I left it. I tried to erase the ache by keeping busy. I worked 12-hour days at the design firm, took freelance jobs on weekends, and saved every penny. My boss, a kind older woman named Denise, told me once, "You're running from something." I smiled and said, "Maybe I'm running toward something." Both were true. I kept a small notebook in my bag labeled "next time." It wasn't dramatic, just reminders of everything I'd do differently if I ever got a second chance: parenting classes, stable work history, documented therapy sessions, emergency funds. Every page was another brick in the wall I was building between my past and my future. Mia, my sister, tried to make me rest. "You can't rebuild yourself if you don't stop to breathe," she said. But she didn't understand, breathing hurt. So instead, I organized. I created folders, legal documents, court notes, financial statements, psychological reports. I learned how the system had failed me the first time. I read law blogs at midnight, cross-checked custody statutes, and highlighted the words stability and bond. Those two words had cost me my son. Someday, they would bring him back. I didn't talk about Daniel much. When people asked, I said we were complicated. Truth was, he'd gone quiet too. The tabloids stopped printing his interviews after the novelty wore off. His new wife, Claire, yes, another Claire, started showing up on social media at galas in sparkling gowns, always holding his arm, always smiling. They looked perfect, but I'd seen perfection up close. It cracks easily. What Daniel didn't realize was that silence worked better for me than it ever would for him. He needed to be seen, I needed to disappear. I volunteered at a community center on weekends, helping with design layouts for their after-school program. No one there knew my last name. They just saw a woman who showed up, did her work, and smiled politely. That was how I wanted the world to see me: calm, capable, consistent. By the second year, I had savings, a promotion, and a reputation for reliability. My therapist, Dr. Patel, called it rebuilding narrative credibility. It sounded fancy, but it was simple. I was becoming the kind of person no court could call unstable. There were small reminders of Liam everywhere. The smell of baby shampoo in a grocery aisle. The sound of a little boy calling mom on a playground. At first, those moments broke me. Later, they fueled me. I started sending cards to his grandparents on holidays, not to Daniel, never directly to him, but to the family. Simple notes like, thinking of Liam. Hope he's doing well. I didn't expect replies, but I knew they'd mention it to Daniel. Let him wonder what I was up to. Let him feel me circling again, quiet and patient. I joined an online parent forum under a different name, asking about visitation rights and legal reopenings. A woman named Sharon, a retired paralegal, messaged me privately. Keep everything documented, she wrote. Judges love paper more than emotion. I printed that line and taped it inside my binder. 3 years in, the fog started to lift. I could laugh again, sometimes even sleep without nightmares. I'd stopped waiting for a knock on the door or a letter from Daniel's lawyer. He'd stopped trying to intimidate me. Maybe he thought I'd given up. Maybe he forgot about me entirely. Good. Forgetting me was his mistake. Because while he was busy managing his image, I was building mine. Every job reference, every therapy note, every tax filing was a piece of armor. And under that armor, I was patient. Then one rainy Thursday, I opened my email and froze. It was a newsletter from a local business journal. Buried halfway down the page was a headline: Harper Construction expands amid financial rumors. Financial rumors. That tiny phrase pulsed in my brain like static. Daniel's company was growing too fast, stretching too thin. I knew his style: all show, no foundation. The cracks were coming. And for the first time in years, I felt something like excitement. I wasn't ready to attack. Not yet. But I could see the edges of his world starting to loosen. The silent years were ending. The storm I'd been preparing for was finally rolling in. By the time the 4th year passed, my quiet little life looked ordinary on the outside: work, coffee runs, yoga classes, volunteering. No one would guess that every night I sat at my desk with 3 monitors, dissecting Daniel's world one document at a time. I had built what I called the binder. Inside were 6 tabs: business, legal, financial, personal, contacts, and Liam. Each section was its own battlefield. I'd promised myself never to move impulsively again. If I went after Daniel, I'd do it with proof, not anger. The business tab came to life first. A former co-worker of mine, Sam, landed a contract with one of Daniel's subsidiaries. He mentioned over lunch that the project invoices kept changing, like someone was hiding costs. I smiled, nodded, and casually asked if he ever saw those reports. 2 weeks later, Sam forwarded a few emails. He didn't realize he'd just handed me gold. The numbers didn't lie. Money was moving between fake vendors and luxury purchases, first-class flights, jewelry, even a yacht rental labeled as a client event. It was the same arrogance I'd seen in our marriage: Daniel thinking rules were for everyone else. I printed everything. One by one, I built a timeline. Dates, payments, recipients. I didn't tell anyone, not Mia, not my therapist, not even Sam. Secrets only stay safe when they stay silent. The next lead came from somewhere I didn't expect, an accountant named Ryan who used to work for Daniel. We met at a fundraising dinner for a housing nonprofit I'd helped design a space for. When he heard my last name, his face changed. "You're that Harper," he said carefully. I nodded. Guilty. He looked down at his drink. He wasn't the man people think he is. We met for coffee the next week. Ryan was nervous but talkative. He told me how Daniel pressured employees to adjust invoices, how he used shell companies for personal spending, and how one major client had already threatened to sue. I didn't ask for evidence, I didn't have to. He offered it willingly, saying, "It's the least I can do." When I walked home that night, rain soaking my jacket, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. Not the kind Daniel used, loud and sharp. This was quiet, patient power. The kind that grows slowly until it's undeniable. A few months later, I reached out to a lawyer named Claire Hunt. She wasn't cheap, but she had a reputation for dismantling powerful men with paperwork alone. I brought her the binder, heart pounding as I set it on her desk. She flipped through it silently for 20 minutes, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up and said, "You've done half my work already. If even half of this holds, his empire is a house of cards." She outlined the plan: file an anonymous complaint with the state's Business Ethics Board, let the investigation begin, and keep my name clear until it mattered most, when custody came up again. We sent the report on a Friday morning. By Monday, local news stations were buzzing with headlines: Harper Development faces financial probe. It wasn't explosive, but it was enough to rattle his investors. Daniel tried to deny everything, of course, but I knew how he operated: denial first, panic later. Within weeks, suppliers demanded audits. Contracts froze. A few brave employees quit and leaked more documents. It was like watching a dam crack, knowing you were the one who loosened the first stone. Around that same time, I received a letter from the court. A petition for visitation review. Daniel's financial instability triggered a reassessment of custody terms. For the first time in years, I had a chance to see Liam, legally, officially, and without fear. The visit was scheduled at a supervised center. I arrived early, sitting on a worn couch with my hands shaking. When the door opened and my son walked in, taller now, hair a little darker, I forgot how to breathe. He hesitated, then smiled shyly. "Hi." I knelt, tears threatening. "Hi, sweetheart." We played with toy dinosaurs, colored on paper, and talked about school. He told me his favorite subject was science. When I asked if he remembered me, he said quietly, "Sometimes I dream about you." That sentence broke and healed me all at once. When the session ended, he hugged me. It was small and awkward, but it was real. For the first time in years, I felt him, warm, solid, mine. That night, I opened my binder and added a new tab: custody. I wrote one line on the first page. "He can't buy what I've earned back." Daniel's downfall had only just begun, but I didn't want chaos. I wanted justice. And for the first time since that courtroom years ago, I knew, this time, I had the upper hand. The storm had arrived, and it had my name written all over it. The first headline had been small, tucked between local politics and weather updates. The next one wasn't. Harper Development under fraud investigation. His empire, the one he'd built on charm and fear, was unraveling right in front of him. And all I had to do was watch. Investors pulled out, projects froze, and journalists started digging. Daniel's name was no longer followed by successful businessman, but under scrutiny. His silence told me everything. He wasn't used to being questioned. He wasn't used to losing. Ryan, the former accountant, texted me updates from time to time. "He's furious," he wrote once. "Blames everyone but himself. You'd think he was the victim." I smiled. I'd lived with that version of Daniel, the one who twisted every failure into someone else's fault. I knew that man better than anyone. But while his world caught fire, mine bloomed quietly. The design firm promoted me to senior associate. I had my own office, my own clients, and my own sense of calm. I bought a small townhouse, a place with light, plants, and a room ready for Liam. Every weekend I added something new: a dinosaur poster, a small bookshelf, soft green curtains. It was preparation disguised as hope. The second visitation went smoother. Liam was less shy this time. He laughed when I did a silly voice while reading his favorite book. He showed me his drawings and told me he wanted to be a builder like Dad. My throat tightened, but I smiled. Then you'll be a great one, I said. I didn't want to poison his image of Daniel. The truth would reveal itself soon enough. Every visit reminded me what I was fighting for, and what Daniel was losing without even realizing it. By spring, the investigation had turned into a full audit. Whispers of embezzlement and tax evasion started circulating. The government froze his business accounts temporarily. His lawyers tried to buy time, but money moves slower when no one trusts you. Then came the rumor that his second marriage was crumbling. His wife, Claire, had filed for separation after discovering he'd transferred company funds into her name to avoid seizure. The man who once controlled everything was now standing on sinking ground. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I simply kept moving. My lawyer, the real Claire, the one who worked for me, called one morning and said, "He's weaker than he's ever been. The court will reopen custody if we file now." We spent weeks preparing. Every document, every therapist note, every job record was lined up perfectly. She built a case not around anger, but around stability. She told me, "Judges don't reward rage, they reward patience. You've done the hardest part already." When Daniel was served with the petition, he responded with his usual arrogance, "You'll never win." I just smiled. "You said that before." The hearing was scheduled for early summer. Daniel showed up wearing a suit that didn't fit quite as well as it used to. His eyes were tired, his confidence brittle. For the first time, he looked like a man trying to convince himself he was still powerful. The judge reviewed the file, eyebrows arching slightly. "Mr. Harper," he said, "these ongoing investigations raise serious questions about your stability." Daniel's lawyer sputtered something about baseless accusations, but Claire countered calmly, citing verified public records and financial statements. The courtroom was quiet except for the sound of paper turning and Daniel's foot tapping nervously. When I took the stand, my voice didn't shake. I spoke about my job, my home, my therapy sessions, and my commitment to providing a healthy environment for Liam. I didn't badmouth Daniel, I didn't need to. The facts did that for me. The judge took notes, nodded, and finally said, "This court will grant an extended visitation period pending final review." It wasn't full custody yet, but it was more time, real, tangible time with my son. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Daniel stared at me as the session ended. "You think this makes you a mother again?" he hissed. I met his glare and said softly, "I never stopped being one." The next few months were a blur of joy and control. Liam and I spent weekends together, museums, pancake breakfasts, silly little adventures. Every moment was a piece of our bond returning. Daniel, meanwhile, was drowning in lawsuits. His house went up for sale, his business collapsed, and creditors lined up like vultures. The man who once boasted about connections now couldn't get a meeting. He'd built his castle out of sand and expected it to hold through the tide. And all the while, I never once raised my voice. I just watched as the tide came in, slow and unstoppable. By the end of that summer, I had something more powerful than revenge. I had momentum. The next court date would decide everything, my future, Liam's life, Daniel's last shred of control. I didn't plan to destroy him. I planned to end him quietly, with truth. Because that's the thing about justice, it doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just walks into the room holding a stack of evidence and a calm smile. And I was ready to walk in. The morning of the custody trial, the world was quiet. No wind, no rain, just that eerie stillness before something changes forever. I stood in front of the mirror, hands steady as I buttoned my navy blazer. I didn't want to look rich or powerful, I wanted to look trustworthy. A woman who'd worked, waited, and earned her peace. Claire met me on the courthouse steps, holding her usual binder of notes and a calm smile. "You're ready," she said, smoothing my sleeve. "This is your day, Emily." Inside, the air felt thick with tension. Daniel was already there, sitting with his attorney, whispering furiously. His suit looked sharp, but his eyes were hollow, dark circles, jittery movements. He wasn't used to being on defense. The judge entered, the same man who once handed Daniel full custody years ago. I'd spent years replaying that first trial in my head, remembering how powerless I felt. Not today. Claire started methodically, walking the court through Daniel's financial records, business loans defaulted, unpaid contractors, frozen accounts. Each document was neatly tabbed and timestamped. Mr. Harper's instability, she said firmly, is no longer speculative, it's factual. Daniel's attorney objected, but the judge overruled it. Then came the witnesses, a former employee, a supplier, and even Ryan, the accountant who'd quit. They testified about unethical practices, unpaid wages, and the temper that drove people out the door. When it was Daniel's turn, he stood and tried to regain control, flashing his old smile. Your Honor, this is a smear campaign by a bitter ex-wife. My finances are under review, yes, but they're stable. My company supports hundreds of families. Claire didn't blink. She approached slowly, her voice cool. And yet, Mr. Harper, you filed for bankruptcy protection 2 weeks ago, didn't you? He froze. His lawyer fumbled for words. Claire placed a document on the stand, his signature, date stamped. Public record, she said simply. The room went still. Daniel's jaw tightened, but the damage was done. Then came my turn. I stood, palms dry, voice calm. I'm not here to punish Daniel, I said. I'm here because I've spent years building the kind of life my son deserves. I've worked consistently, maintained my health, and stayed patient. I want Liam to grow up in a home filled with peace, not chaos. I looked at the judge, then at Daniel. He took him from me once because he said I wasn't stable. But I am now. And he isn't. For a second, no one spoke. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. Then the judge leaned forward, his tone deliberate. This court has reviewed all evidence presented, financial, psychological, and testimonial. Mrs. Harper, your growth and stability are clear. Mr. Harper, your record demonstrates concerning behavior and ongoing instability. The court finds grounds to reverse the previous custody ruling. He paused. My heart stopped. Effective immediately, primary custody of the minor child, Liam Harper, is awarded to his mother, Emily Harper. The world blurred. I heard Claire exhale beside me, felt her hand squeeze mine, but everything else was a rush of sound, papers rustling, chairs scraping, Daniel muttering angrily under his breath. He turned toward me, face flushed. You'll ruin him, he hissed. I met his eyes, my voice steady. No, Daniel. You already did. I'm fixing it. The bailiff signaled for the court to clear. Outside, the air hit my face like sunlight after a storm. For a moment, I just stood there on the courthouse steps, letting it sink in. I'd won. After years of humiliation, after rebuilding myself from the ground up, I'd finally taken my son back. That evening, I went home to the little townhouse I'd prepared. The room with green curtains waited, smelling faintly of laundry detergent and hope. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of Liam's first birthday, the one Daniel never let me keep. I placed it beside his new school picture. Past and present, side by side. Mia called, crying into the phone. You did it, Em. You really did it. I didn't cry. I just smiled and said, he's coming home. Because revenge wasn't just about winning. It was about restoring what was stolen, proving that patience beats power, and that no amount of money could erase a mother's love. Daniel had built his empire to look invincible. I'd built my revenge to be unbreakable. And that day, in that courthouse, I proved which one lasts longer. The day Liam came home for good, he stood in the doorway with his little backpack and a dinosaur poking out of the zipper. He looked up at me like he was checking whether I was real. I knelt, opened my arms, and he stepped into them without a word. His head fit under my chin the same way it had years ago. I'd imagined that exact hug 1,000 times. The real thing was quieter. Better. We kept it simple that first week. Pancakes for dinner, cartoons in the morning, extra blankets, and a nightlight shaped like the moon. I didn't push questions. He didn't push answers. We built a rhythm out of ordinary things: shoes by the door, homework at the table, his drawings lined up on the fridge like a parade. Every time he laughed, something inside me unclenched. Daniel didn't call. He couldn't. His lawyers were too busy trying to keep him out of deeper trouble to file anything new. The investigation that had started as a rumor was now a bulldozer. Accounts frozen. Properties listed. His company restructured, which is a pretty word for being taken away from him. When the bankruptcy papers went public, even his loudest friends found other rooms to be in. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't even say finally out loud. I cooked, worked, and showed up to every pickup and parent-teacher conference like a woman who had waited long enough. Peace takes maintenance. The second week, Liam asked if we could change his room. "Can it look like a forest?" he said, holding up a crayon drawing of tall trees and a small tent. We spent Saturday at the hardware store picking paint the color of moss. He wore a tiny apron and helped roll the walls. He got more paint on himself than the room, but the laughter made the mess holy. We strung little lights across the ceiling. When we plugged them in, he whispered, "It looks like stars." I tucked him in and stayed until he fell asleep under our handmade sky. Claire, my lawyer, the one who fought with paper and patience, called a month later. "One more step," she said. Because of the fraud counts and the court's findings about coercion in the original custody case, the DA is willing to support termination of his parental rights. If you want to petition to adopt, this is the moment. Adopt my own son. The words felt strange and perfect at once. Daniel had used the system to adopt Liam away from me. I would use the same system, fairly, openly, to bring him back under my name, legally and forever. We prepared quietly. Home study. Character references. A tidy stack of proof that my life was steady and safe: pay stubs, lease, insurance, school records. The social worker walked through our little townhouse and smiled at the handprints on the hallway paint. "He seems happy here," she said. Liam came barreling out of his room with a cardboard sword and asked if she wanted to see his stars. She did. Everyone did. Court days don't scare me anymore. They used to feel like cliffs. Now they feel like rooms I know how to leave. We sat in a small hearing room with scuffed benches and humming lights. Daniel's side table was empty. He'd filed a single letter through counsel asking for a continuance and consideration. The judge denied both. Consequences can read like poetry when you've memorized pain. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Harper, you're requesting to adopt Liam Harper and to restore his birth certificate listing you as mother of record with sole parental rights. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." She read from a short order, findings about fraud, duress, and the harm caused by the original custody actions. Then she said the sentence I will hear in my bones for the rest of my life: petition granted. It didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like a door unlocking from the inside. Outside the courthouse, I lifted Liam and spun him around right there on the steps. He squealed and clung to my neck. Mia was waiting with a cupcake and a candle shaped like the number 1. "For your first day," she said, wiping at tears. "Your first day is everything again." We made it official in small, sweet ways. New birth certificate. New school forms. New library card. Same bedtime song. I kept the old binder, the one labeled records, but I slid it to the back of a closet. I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't need it on the counter anymore. A weapon can become a keepsake when the war is over. People asked what happened to Daniel. The short answer: the fall you choose is a long one. He sold the big house to pay legal fees, then the lake cabin to settle a supplier suit, then the cars because the bank asked nicely and then less nicely. The last I heard, he moved into a rental near the edge of town. He sent a letter through his attorney promising to rebuild and return. It was written like a press release, more brand than blood. We didn't respond. The court had already answered on our behalf. Sometimes I think about the man he used to pretend to be. How charm can look like kindness until you need it to hold, and it doesn't. I don't hate him. Hatred is a leash. I set it down. Life got small in the best way. Saturday soccer, muddy shoes, grocery runs where Liam sneaks apples into the cart like a thief with vitamins. He learned to whistle, I learned to stop checking the door twice. On warm nights, we sit on the steps and count airplanes. When one blinks red over the rooftops, he says, make a wish. I always wish for the same thing, not luck, not money. Time. More time exactly like this. One evening, after dishes, he pulled a folded paper from his backpack. We had to write about our hero, he said, suddenly shy. He handed it to me. My Hero by Liam H. My hero built a room with stars and pancakes. My hero sings even when she's tired. My hero found me. I didn't cry. I let the words fill the places where fear used to live and felt them settle like furniture we'd keep forever. The next morning, we went to the office that handles name changes and made his last name match mine again. The clerk stamped the form and slid it back with a smile. It took 5 minutes. It took 5 years. On the walk home, Liam asked, are we done now? I looked down at him, our shadows walking ahead like they knew the way. Yeah, I said, squeezing his hand. We're done. That night, I stood in his doorway and watched him sleep under the tiny lights. Beyond the window, the city moved, sirens far away, a bus sighing, a neighbor's laugh floating up like a promise. I thought about the girl who once believed power always wins. She was wrong. Power is loud. Patience is louder. People will tell you revenge is the moment your enemy breaks. It isn't. It's the morning you pour 2 bowls of cereal and realize the only thing left of him in your house is the quiet. I turned out the hall light, that soft click I'd been waiting for, and went to bed. 5 years have passed since the court gave Liam back to me. He's 10 now, taller, louder, full of opinions about everything from dinosaurs to the best pancake toppings. He still leaves his socks in the living room and talks in his sleep. I still pick up the socks and whisper the same thing every night before turning out the light, we made it. The townhouse looks different now. The green curtains are faded from the sun. The kitchen table is covered in scratches from school projects and science experiments. On the fridge, the old court photo is gone, replaced by a field trip picture, Liam in a blue cap, smiling without hesitation. The house finally feels like a home that belongs to us and no one else. Daniel's shadow faded over time. I didn't chase updates, but whispers have a way of finding you. The last I heard, he moved to another state after losing what was left of his company. There were talks of new ventures that never started, new relationships that never lasted. He called once, his number showed up on my phone one evening after dinner. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Silence was the answer he'd earned. Sometimes, I still think about him, not the man himself, but the version of me that existed around him. The scared, quiet woman who believed control was love and that patience was weakness. I wish I could tell her she was wrong. I wish I could tell her she wasn't broken, just buried under the weight of someone else's story. But maybe she wouldn't have believed me. Maybe she had to lose everything to learn that kind of truth. Liam doesn't ask much about the past anymore. When he does, I keep it simple. Your dad and I didn't see things the same way, I say. But we both loved you. It's not the full story, but it's the right one for now. He deserves a future that isn't built on old wounds. What surprises me most is how ordinary happiness feels. It isn't fireworks. It's small, quiet things, Sunday mornings, homework help, a kitchen that smells like coffee and syrup. It's laughter echoing down a hallway that once knew nothing but silence. last month, I finally took a week off work. Liam and I drove to the coast, to a tiny beach town where no one knew us. We stayed in a cottage with peeling paint and seashells lining the windowsill. One night, we sat on the sand watching the sunset turn the water gold. He looked up and said, "Mom, this is the best day ever." I smiled, feeling that sentence sink deep. "Yeah," I said. "It really is." The waves rolled in slow and steady, and I realized that revenge had never really been my ending, it was just the bridge. The way across the hurt, not the destination itself. What waited on the other side wasn't fury, it was peace. The binder, the one I'd built in the darkest nights, is still in the closet. I keep it there not as a weapon but as a reminder. Sometimes I take it out and flip through the pages, old documents, screenshots, yellowed notes in my handwriting. The woman who wrote them was scared but determined. She didn't know if she'd ever win. She just knew she couldn't quit. I don't think of it as a story of revenge anymore. It's a story of reclamation, of a mother who learned that patience is louder than power, that quiet persistence can bend even the strongest lies, and that sometimes, justice doesn't shout. It simply waits. Liam's laughter drifts from the next room as I write this. He's playing his favorite song on a beat-up keyboard, the notes uneven but joyful. I think about all the nights I cried for him, and I realize those tears built the road that led here. Maybe that's the secret about revenge, it doesn't end when your enemy falls. It ends when you rise. The other night, before bed, Liam asked, "Mom, when I'm older, can I tell people our story?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. But tell them what you learned, not what we lost." He thought about it, then said, "I'll tell them that good people don't always win right away. But they do if they keep going." And with that, he turned off his light and went to sleep, leaving me in the hallway with tears I didn't need to hide anymore. I closed his door and looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably still chasing something, money, control, a version of himself that never really existed. But me? I didn't need to chase anything anymore. Because the best revenge isn't taking back what was stolen. It's living so fully that you forget it was ever taken. I shut off the light, whispered goodnight to the stars, and went to bed, free at last, not just from him, but from the past itself. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.